Welcome back to another episode of the Working Mama podcast. I'm your host and fellow working mum, Karina O'Brien. Today, I'm joined by the insightful and inspiring Laura Stewart. She's a mum of a busy toddler, former executive general manager in infrastructure and consulting, and now the founder of a strategic social enterprise. Laura shares her deeply personal and transformative story of returning to work after maternity leave, navigating a complete shift in identity, and how that journey has now led her to create a values-led business designed to support women to thrive. This conversation is honest, raw, empowering, and full of practical tools to help you feel less alone and more equipped to handle the juggle of motherhood and career. As always, if you love this episode, it would be greatly appreciated if you could share it with a fellow working mum. Just send them a text message and say, hey, I think you'd love this Working Mama episode. So let's get into today's episode. Welcome, Laura. Welcome to the Working Mama podcast. How's your day going so far?
It's been good. It's been good. It's the usual tantrums just before bedtime. But yeah, we've got the child into the bath, into his pajamas, and he's getting his around to him at the moment. So yeah, good.
Very good. So Laura, to start us off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your career journey, who's in your family, and what led you to the work that you're doing today? I know there's a lot in that question.
Yeah, absolutely. I do actually first want to thank you for creating space for these conversations. So thank you for the invitation, but thank you for actually holding space for this conversation. I really wish that I had found this podcast way earlier in my journey to be a mum. So good job, you.
My pleasure. And also kudos to your husband for actually nominating you to come on this show. He and I were on a study tour together last year. And when I put up a post on LinkedIn and said, who would like to share their story? Everyone put themselves forward. But your husband put you forward, Laura.
Yeah, he's good at the volunteering. He's good at that. Yeah. So as you beautifully introduced, I'm Laura. I am a mum of a very busy toddler. My son is 2.5 and a founder of a strategic social enterprise. So we offer strategic advisory services. But before I started my business, not that long ago, I have had a career for more than 15 years in infrastructure and consulting, particularly around stakeholder engagement, strategy, and innovation. So I have worked on some really big, complex transport, energy, water projects, from policy run through to delivery. And I guess the common thread throughout my career has really been about solving complex human problems. And I guess how this then relates to becoming a mum, I kind of feel like being a mum is an endless day of solving complex human problems. So, yeah.
That's the every little bit of your role and things like that. So I hope you don't mind me sharing, but you said that while you're on maternity leave, you actually resigned from your role. You don't have to go into details, but I'm just interested as well, just in the psychology that goes around that, because that's a pretty big change.
It is a really big change. And I guess that it was, in that sort of midst of, it was kind of towards the end of my maternity leave when you start talking about, returning to work and what that workplace was going to be. And I did end up resigning at that point. And it was really because my role at the time, I didn't feel like my previous role really fit me anymore and the person that I was going to become. So at that point, I really had to make a call for lots of reasons about whether I return or whether I extend. And I kind of made the decision to let the team move on, to let the succession plan continue. But more importantly for me, to really decide that I wasn't that where I was at with my own personal journey was going to take me to a different place. And in that journey, although it took me a few years to go, it did end up eventually leading me to start like a business where I really felt to be my best self, where I felt like I could do the work in a way that was adding value, for my family as well as me. And, aspirationally, I also hope to design a business that supports other women, not exclusively women, but we've certainly put some specific design in how we structure our business to be a place where we can thrive and do their best work.
That's really good. And out of interest, did you create a business as well based in around your family desires and about trying to get flexibility for your family? Because I know it's something that a lot of women, when they're, I would say, in that transition back to work after maternity leave, of actually looking, okay, how am I going to make this work and how about the juggle? And I think it's one thing that a lot of women go, if I could actually design it in and around my family, that would actually really help me, as you said, be your best self.
Yeah, I think as a byproduct, yes. Whether intentionally, it wasn't my prime motivation. My motivation in relation to that was really about my values and how my values had changed and how I saw contribution to work. And that I really wanted what I did to be really valuable and to feel like I was spending my time wisely. If I was going to be away from my son, that it was really important to me that I was doing something where I felt meaning and purpose. So it wasn't always and just about flexibility because I did go back to a role for a period of time in a corporate organization. My son was about 10 months old. I was working 4 days a week and I felt like I got some good flexibility and felt supported in the practicalities and the logistics of work. But then it ultimately came down to feeling valued and feeling like I'm spending time in the best possible way.
Mm. It's really interesting how, as becoming new mums, we go through that identity shift, which is also then called matrescence, of actually then identifying, well, who are we now, how our values change and things like that. And it's something as well, when we return back into work, we often don't do that reflection part and we get back in a few months later going, who the heck are we? So it's really powerful that you actually did that in before you returned as part of then that transition to help identify, well, what's most important to you. And yeah, not be alone in that as well. That so many people go through that as a transition.
Yeah, and I don't think too many people talk about it. So it certainly
No.
did. It came as a really big surprise to me that I felt like that. And then I was so uncertain about going back to a role where I thought, going back to the old me, that the old kind of rhythm was going to just be crazy. I originally intended to take 4 months of maternity leave. I'm really not quite sure what I was thinking. Those around me were like, yeah, sure, Laura, that's definitely what you're going to do. So I did, initially extend my leave like another 6 months. So that was my first mistake. But it certainly surprised me about how hard it was to really go back to that old me. And it was less about the job, but it was more about me.
Yeah. And more about the work that you were
Yeah.
doing. How much you talk about how your values had changed? Was there something quite distinctive that you felt that of going, all right, as you were saying, my old me was X and then my new me is Y? Was there a distinct difference in the values? I think you've mentioned it a few times and I think it's really interesting.
Yeah. It's part of the work that we have done over the course of probably the last 2 years. Initially, the resistance and the feeling that I felt, contemplating it, I thought was about my ambition. And I thought it was about maybe I wasn't as ambitious as I was before. I was, very much of, I'm troubled person and the mindset that I was progressing. I was, leading quite a large team. At that point, I was the executive general manager at the time. So I was on a trajectory where I was pretty comfortable, moving, and that was very traditional, I guess. And certainly having my son made me question whether or not that was the only way to be successful. And if it was indeed success, it certainly personally, again, with I think our values opened up my definition of what success was
Mm.
and how you could get there. So I think that's the values piece for me was that, my definition of success and what I wanted to spend my time doing was no longer about just turning the dial and doing the thing. And it was actually about, well, what things am I doing? And are they having an impact on people, on organizations and on public problems we have?
And did you follow a framework to go through that quite internal and very personal work? Or was it something that was built up over a period of days and weeks and months?
Definitely months, definitely months. I was quite fortunate to have a leadership coach that I had been working with before I went on maternity leave. We kind of picked up some work, so I was thinking about returning to work. So she was a really good resource and a good guide for me. And I had previously done some work with coaches that, kind of went deep into the toolkit, was pulling out things, like little Venn diagrams where we start to understand, what brings me joy, what should I do, what do people value. So it was definitely using a whole bunch of tools and frameworks to really try to understand why I was thinking in this way or where I could structure my tree moving forwards in a meaningful way.
Mm. What was that like for you coming out the other end? And no doubt there were probably some light bulb moments and even probably some quite big emotions of like, oh my goodness, like where am I going? This is not what
Yeah.
I thought. Like there must be so much behind that, because to go through that and to use all those tools, there's often quite a lot of deep internal work that
Mhm.
happens.
Yeah.
And then you have this light, like it can come sometimes quite quickly, or it can be like a bit of an epiphany of going, what the heck? Like I guess it's
Yeah.
you like at an intersection and going, thought I was going to go straight. No, I'm going round and roundabout and we're going to take a big right turn.
Yeah. Absolutely. There was lots of emotion. There were definitely tears. There was definitely hard work. I had absolutely not expected that opportunity to even manifest. And to do so when you're also trying to navigate the fact that you brought this human into the world and you're trying to work out, how do I deal with the ever changing and ever growing, baby next to me who is, changing what feels like every day or every week. Once you've got the routine, it's changing and you're changing. It was a lot. I'm really lucky to have some good support around me. And, there was lots of chats with my mother's group and, chats with my leadership coach, my husband, friends, and then just a lot of, sometimes a bit of a cuddle and a bit of a cry to be frank and very vulnerable about that. But I think it has served me well. And it's not to say that everybody's journey needs to be nearly as emotional as that or as deep as that. Where I've landed is in a really good place. I feel like I have come out the other side as a person I'm actually feeling really comfortable with. And it was absolutely worth the work.
Do you think that you're more confident now than what you were beforehand because you've done so much work, I guess, going through that reflective period and like, okay, who am I? No doubt you've done that previously with your leadership coach, but as we all know, having kids completely changes the paradigm.
Yeah, absolutely. I do. I feel, yeah, absolutely. I feel much more confident in me, in what I'm talking. I even remember I just being more confident being a mom. When I first went back to a role, I didn't really even want to talk to my, the people around me, the new people I was meeting, my team at the time, that I wasn't on. That wasn't what I led. I was Laura, I was this professional, and I'm here as the leader to do this. I deliberately wanted to kind of keep my work in professional as my myself. And then it was first week I had started, I actually got invited to a working mum's lunch. It was a really informal team's call where some of the mums from the team I was leading dialed in and just had a chat about being mum, about working, just in general. And I thought I should dial in. That invited me. So I joined the call and got to meet some new people I hadn't met yet. And it suddenly occurred to me that it was actually really important to me and the team that I identified myself as a mum.
Mm.
And I've really leaned into that sense. And it's now a big part of my identity. It's a big part of my leadership. It's a big part of what I do, why I do it.
Yeah, no, so good, so good. I remember as well in a personal experience that there was a lady at work that I used to work with many moons ago, had no idea she even had a daughter, like no idea. And she worked 5 days a week. It was this like really intense role. And I was like, and then one time she said, I've got a child. I'm like, what? I had no idea. Like she never talked about it, never referenced her and anything like that. And I think maybe it even left a mark on me of like, well, no, this is my identity. This is who I am. If I need to be able to do something and something for my kids, I need to be able to own up to it and that. But yeah, it's interesting how that identity shift comes. And then, but then also once you lent into it, how did you find yourself at work then the way that you showed up?
It kind of gave me permission to really be, to be all of me. And I told stories. I would open team meetings what happened on the weekend. I suddenly felt like I could actually bring my whole self to work, which was quite incredible. And yeah, let your
Yeah.
guard down. And I think that was actually really good because people need to know, who you are as a leader in particular, who you are, who you're about. And I think you can only really set a great example to do that.
Yeah. No, that's so special. And thank you so much for sharing. So in that, just to summarize it all,
Yeah.
if someone is newly returning into work and kind of where you were when you first returned, what would you say to them, and what would be some tips or some techniques or tools to help them through that? Because that identity shift does have a name. It's called matrescence.
Yeah.
But also there's so much that goes in behind it. They're going, I'm a different person. What do I do? Who am I? I'm more than just a mum, is what we'll often say.
Yeah.
But what would be your advice, or what would you have given the advice to your younger self?
Yeah, I think at the time I didn't really know that it was indeed a thing and that feeling like this was okay.
Mm.
I feel like there are a lot of pressures on mum to just kind of keep going and keep kind of feeling all sorts of weird things, but let's not kind of dive deeper or explore too. So I think it's my advice is certainly to really unpack that feeling, like take the time to lean into it and understand why you may be feeling a bit uncertain or feeling a bit different or feeling a bit hesitant, because there's often something underlying. I would absolutely recommend you take the time to listen to a podcast or read an article or be curious about the concept of the changing identity, because it is happens in small ways, it happens in big ways. Really, obviously depends on circumstance, individuals. But be curious about it, learn a bit about it, and scratch beneath the surface to try to put in some of the work that's relevant for you.
Yeah, and you'll never know what you get out of it at the end. But also
Yeah,
probably actually step into your true self, is what you mentioned earlier about who you are, can actually own who I am in all my identities. Because I think there's sometimes so much of, even in media and things, of I'm a mom and I've got to be an employee and things like that. Well, as you said, you don't have to separate the two. You can actually have them integrated together.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think the more that we can do that, and the more that we can also have examples for how that, you know, mums, dad, any kind of, care and sort or support should be able to show up to the workplace and be able to express that.
Yeah, definitely. And so when you were returning back into work, were there any other surprises or pressures that you felt, I guess, probably from an organization or even in yourself in that return?
I think one of the biggest things that really did surprise me was, aligned to the conversation that we just had around reshaping values, was that I kind of had this idea that returning to work specifically was just a different routine, and what needed to change or what needed to be different with the routine and the logistics, that it was actually much bigger than that. Um, it wasn't just, when daycare was, which drop-offs I was going to do. It was kind of everything, how I was going to work, when I'd feel like working. So I started to really look into to energy and when I was most productive and when I was most creative, and then try to, as best as one can with a toddler who's trying to sleep or not sleeping, or a baby in some cases, match my energy to my work and my calendar. So I think getting into the rhythm of a little structure but unpredictability and somehow sitting at ease with those two things and trying to find tools again, some frameworks and strategies that would help me do that.
Yeah,
I'm a really
amazing.
structured control freak, and that absolutely threw me.
How did you go being a control freak, as what you just said in your own words, as a
Yeah.
new mum? I know, and I've heard time and time again stories of women going, particularly I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, like the type A personality
Yeah.
is, right. And I've heard many women in that same bucket of like, right, I'm going to return back into work after 3 months and I'm going to be there. And everyone
Yeah.
goes, yeah, yep, just you wait. And then something completely opposite almost sometimes happens. But
Yeah.
being that type of personality, how has motherhood, and then also working motherhood, then really shaken things up? Because it can actually then be quite a change, I guess, mentally, of how you manage and have those structures around as well.
Yeah. Look, we'll probably get to systems a bit later because that's kind of the solution. But I think as a very much a type A personality, generous leading kind of big team, lots of structure and lots of things to do. It was a significant shock to my system to not be able to have that consistency. And I think I'm only really just getting into a bit of a rhythm where I'm okay with that level of disruption. It made me kind of somewhat feel like I was perhaps failing, or I really didn't know what I was doing with my baby, even during the period of maternity leave when things you thought worked yesterday are no longer working. So to be able to let go and realize it's actually not about me, it's about them, and it's about there, and it's all part of the developmental journey. Again, I went into learning and listening to podcasts and reassuring myself it wasn't just me, it's part of the joy. And really then finding a joy in the disruption in the mess. That it's okay that we didn't quite get to do what we had planned, even over the weekend. We got a rough night on Saturday night, and Sunday I had some wonderful plans with friends, and it didn't quite go. We did that at all.
Oh, these little
Yeah.
people and things like that.
Yeah.
So you just mentioned about systems and structures and things like that. What has worked for you with
Yeah.
systems and structures to help you navigate this period?
Yeah. So I had some advice a very, very long time ago in one of the years of leadership retreat I was doing around being your best self and being able to thrive is really about systems and hacks and how you can design your day or your week or your week, make the most out of that. And I didn't pay a huge amount of attention to it at the time, and it kind of surfaced when I started thinking about returning to work. What are the things that I need to put in place that are going to ease the friction of the morning or the day or the week and kind of make us a happy, healthy household as best as we possibly could? Because certainly the old way of, that pleasantness that we used to kind of work towards was going to work anymore. So I designed hacks or microsystems, which I deliberately identify pain points through my day.
Mm.
If I'm not a morning person, mornings are not great for me. I'm typically quite slow. I don't like making decisions. But obviously the morning when, again, you've got a baby or a toddler, they're up and about, it's like going to work. So I have tried to implement things to make the mornings easier. Simplified my wardrobe, so I've got less choices. It's all kind of organized, so that one less choice to make in the morning. Daycare bag is had too much of everything in case, we need to restock. My son actually has reason a hanging shoe rack. So one of the door that hangs on his door with all of his clothes for about 3 weeks worth of daycare on the back of it. So every morning it's just like take off and go. All of these kind of simple things that sound quite mundane, but when you add them up, it means that we get out the door a little faster and more stress and questioning things a lot less.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that if you know what your pain point is,
Yeah,
you've actually taken some pretty significant steps and then go, okay, I'm not great in the morning. What can we do to systematize even, the clothes and things like that around it, which makes such a big, I guess in when you think about it, it's quite simple, but there's actually takes extra planning as well around, okay, let's get everything ready and things like that. But that morning chaos, and
yeah,
it is a chaos, as we all know, anything to make it that even just that 30 seconds a little bit smoother.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So kind of taking the decisions out, taking the complexity out and try, kind of ease morning. And increasingly, it's slightly difficult to, dress the toddler and get out the door. But, I feel like she goes at least shortcut some things that a little bit.
Yeah. And how did then the conversation then go with your husband of like, right, okay, how's this going to go? And then in terms of these hacks, are
Yeah,
you on board? Because sometimes not all partners may necessarily be on board and they're like, oh, it's your job or I'm going to do this. And
yeah.
yeah.
I think that's probably the other big thing that I have learned has been about the importance of communication. There's a couple of things to that. One is definitely around hacks and the systems. My husband's definitely not necessarily about systems, but he certainly knows, my need for them. So he's lent into that very kindly and certainly aids that process. But I have also had to communicate my capacity, which is something we didn't have to do pre-children.
Mhm.
We didn't really have to kind of dive too much into what made our morning stressful or not. It was usually just a read or play and wardrobe crashes. But now it is about, my capacity, what's happening in the family, what's happening in the week, and who can take the lead on what, activities. Brene Brown actually has a really nice way of describing this, where she says that there is never a 50-50. It's never 50-50 in a relationship. There is always things happening that mean you're sharing the load, but sometimes it's a 70-30 split. Sometimes it's a 40-60. But being able to kind of communicate that and saying, like, today I've got 30, can you pick up my 20?
Mm.
Or even better, you play that in advance. So extras, tax, apply it, but also just like the whole, the wheels move a bit smoother.
I think so. And I think it's such a good point that you make that I don't think it's ever 50-50. And so much of me, and when I
Yeah,
read things about trying to get work-life balance, I'm like, on what planet do we ever think it's completely balanced? Like, as you said, things go, you may have something like I've put my son to bed tonight and he's sniffling and I'm already thinking, okay, if he's sick tomorrow, what's the strategy going to be? Like, he goes, oh, if you're sick, I can't get out of bed. And I'm like, oh, right, we'll see how you are in the morning. Positive. And I'm trying to go, that's all right. You'll be right in the morning. You'll be better. Like positive reinforcement of you need to get to Kinder. But it's one of those things that it's never balanced. It's, as you say, I know your husband travels and things like that. And there's things that it's never set day to day. Like every day is different. And it's why, yeah, what you just said, it's so important, and that communication piece behind it as well.
Yeah, and be realistic that it's not 50-50. I think when I watched this little clip from Brené Brown, it was a bit of a light bulb moment that like, okay, we actually don't have to split it down the middle. How do we actually play to our strength? How do we play to the things that we will tolerate in terms of the jobs at home that maybe we don't want to do, or the things that, need to get done, and just logistically what's going to make more sense for us as a family. I certainly knew that, my husband does 90% of the daycare jobs and pick us just because logistically that works for us. But then on the flip side, I've got other jobs like, I'll deal with the meals and all that stuff. So it's never 50-50 and weeks so by, and it's quite the same. But again, if we're communicating and we're clear and we're aware of what we can if we're going, then we can get there.
Yeah, communication is so important. Was there anything else that you surprised? I know that you also wrote a post on LinkedIn around mum guilt.
Yeah.
And you said about how you're letting go of mum guilt. Do you want to just talk us about, I guess, some of the psychology that you got to getting to that and how you're actually shedding that mum guilt?
Yeah. So this post of mine was inspired during my grief, and it hit me one afternoon when I was feeling, as we all do, a little bit guilty about all sorts of things, really, that guilt wasn't actually helping anyone. That it wasn't helping me. Certainly wasn't helping my son. So I wasn't really sure why we continued to allow that whole guilt narrative to exist. And in actual fact, it was after guilt, sending our kids to daycare, going back to wanting to go back to marriage. What we were feeding our kids, of how much was home cooked, of, the list goes on and on and on. And seeing these incredibly beautiful women absolutely, lamenting over these small details made me so sad. And then it really got me thinking about why we were not focused on all the great things we were doing of raising beautiful children.
Yeah.
And why we were worrying so much about the horrible things that may or may not even eventuate. So I started to, again, learn a little bit about mum guilt and unpack it for myself. And it got me down about why I was second guessing my choices, because ultimately the guilt was about second guessing your choices, or second guessing your decision or your gut reaction. So I did write a little bit of a reflection piece, and it often comes from the care, which, we care so much about our kids and family. That's why we feel guilt, but it's without boundaries and without patience. And the other part of guilt is that we often feel it because we're worrying about what others think.
The comparison artist.
Yeah. But why are we worrying about what everybody else thinks? Because everybody else is just trying to get by doing their best. So I guess that realization that everyone is just trying to do their best with whatever it is we've got in front of us really gave me permission, or I gave myself permission to refrain and ultimately focus only on what my son needed and what my family needed. That was ultimately for me to be happy. So I haven't mastered the whole guilt thing. I catch myself, not all the time, but I certainly keep working on it. And I know when I identify that feeling, that I try to just go slow and fine.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful that we, as you say, you can be scrolling on Instagram or something like that, scrolling on whatever social media, and you're like, oh, they look like they've got it together. And like, you have a microsecond of insight into what's actually going on in reality. And no one's going to really necessarily be posting up what your crazy reality is of any particular moment and things like that. And as you say, guilt to who? If your kids are fed, they're happy, they're thriving in themselves, they're growing, they're making friendships and they're hitting all their milestones, why do you have to feel guilty about it? And it's sometimes what annoys me as well, the patriarchal system, the way that, mums in society and things like that. Well, why can't we be a mum and also have a career and things as well? And, why should we feel guilty? It's funny how I was away last week with work. I was traveling 2 weeks in a row, and this guy said to me, "Oh, you're away from the kids again." And I'm thinking, you're Melbourne based, and so are you. You're away for a second week. But I didn't call him out on it. But I was like, no,
Yeah.
no guy's going to say to someone, "Oh, you're away again." Like, should you feel guilty about not seeing your kids? And I'm like, well, yeah, it's funny how the conversations that happen to women are so different to men. And it's that guilt factor. And where did it come from? All the societal mental models and things like that around what women should be doing and things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally agree with you. Let go of the guilt where you can. And when you find yourself doing it, you're like, okay, just like some of the mindset stuff, like the strategies is, okay, where's it coming from? Where's the evidence? All right. My
Yes.
kids are okay. Something make me feel guilty. No, they're actually with their dad who's doing a pretty great job. So why should I feel guilty?
Absolutely. And I think that we, as other moms and we should have each other's back and kind of call that when we're hearing that from people that we know really ask them, challenge that thinking and challenge that mindset to support each other to reframe that thinking. Because it is absolutely a cultural norm and a narrative that we shared about, the ideal motherhood being all sacrificing and mum doing everything and mum turning the house into a home. But it's really not. It's not just on mum. It's on anyone in that support network. It's not just split out.
Yeah, and it's, the village, it's like obviously our partners, our husbands, but also then the wider village around us that help makes us work. It's,
Yeah.
as it was, a couple of 100 years ago as a village that helped raise a family and things like that. Unfortunately, in Western culture, we don't have as such a village, but whatever it takes. And, if our kids are okay, it's like the guilt of, oh, your kids are young, they should be there. And I'm thinking, the mental health issues of our teenagers at the moment, particularly teenage boys,
Yeah.
actually scares me more
Yeah.
than probably a 4-year-old boy at the moment. So,
Yeah.
but it's one of those things. We're in that, I guess, bubble. That's going to be where it is. But yeah, there's certainly a lot of pressures on mums, no matter what age the children are. Everyone's going through an issue. It's something that, yeah, as you say, you're doing the best thing as what you possibly can with the resources you have available at that particular time.
Yeah. And I think the concept of village is really important too. It was probably one of my reframes associated with guilt was, the idea of daycare and, again, you see a lot about pros and cons of how much is too much and how much is not enough. We don't have family here in Sydney. So daycare is a really important part of our village. But for me to actually call them part of our village was again something that I chose to do and that we talk about all the time because they are fundamental to our son's upbringing, and it was about where he went, who he's with, and they're incredible. Their educators are amazing. We work really closely with them. They provide a huge amount of support and love and care for him. So to think about them as our village, I think is important. Yeah, to make us all feel a little bit better about how we pick him up.
Yeah, fantastic. So if you had, any advice for fellow working mums listening who might be going through a bit of a firefighting phase at the moment, where do you think that they could start that would help them, I guess, design the systems to help them in their mum hacks? But also if they're probably thinking, oh my God, I'm feeling the guilt, but I know that I shouldn't be feeling the guilt, and how to
Yeah,
go through that reframe as what you've done.
yeah, yeah. I think I would start with the moments of the points of friction and start by asking what part does always unravel, what part does always cause the tension or the disagreement or the temperature, and kind of work backwards from there. Because I think until we really understand what's that thing that's kind of getting in the way, we can't really find a way to it. But I also think to encourage that every day is a bit of an experiment and something that worked yesterday but not work necessarily today. And at that sort of point of failure, it's kind of a point of experiment. And maybe you need to kind of refine the system or give yourself a bit of a break that today's just not a perfect day. So yeah, I think if we're going to try to resolve the firefighting constant need to change something, it's first of all identifying friction root, but secondly also being okay. Not every day is necessarily a perfect day.
Yeah. And if you had some mums that are going through like a bit of a guilt and then that deep, dark hole, which it can be quite a deep, dark hole, what are some tools and tips or strategies that you'd recommend to help pull them out of that environment or that mindset at the moment?
Yeah. I think the first piece, and I've talked to, a couple of new mums about this, but it's to give yourself permission to grow into a new version of yourself. And as we were talking about earlier, it's really to be a bit curious about, maybe why you're feeling like that and to really, understand more. You're not just returning to the new you, like we're not going backwards, we're actually going forwards. And if we can think about it as a process of recreation, of rediscovery of, and it's not that the old person is a bad person, it's just different now. So becoming someone new, even more capable, even more confident, even more able, it does take time and it can feel sticky and it can feel uncomfortable. But that's okay and that's kind of fine. And to do that, I think finding people to support, finding information or tools that you can digest and it, taking your time to do the work and do that reflection.
Yeah, it's one of the things around leadership as well, isn't they say that when you're feeling uncomfortable, it actually means you're going through a period of growth and
Yes,
development.
absolutely.
And so if you actually feel like you're just scared, if you're just like, right, I'm just nailing everything at the moment, you're not going backwards, but you're a bit stationary. So if you're actually feeling a bit sticky and icky of going, I don't know what I'm doing, it actually means you're growing and elevating up.
Yeah. Yeah, that is brilliant. I love that so much. And that is such a great analogy, I think, to the journey that we go through as a mum. It does feel uncomfortable, but we are stretching and we are growing and we are learning every single day.
Yeah, there's a lot of leadership principles that I think you can apply in like I guess in frameworks. You can certainly apply them into motherhood as well.
Yeah, not just the negotiation skills, you're right. There's
Yes.
negotiation itself, but definitely, and I think that self-reflection, just which is always going to be part of my leadership in the corporate world, has probably served me quite well. So yeah, self-reflection, thinking about, some of those constructs, absolutely.
Well, Laura, I have to say I've absolutely enjoyed this chat. I could talk to you all day, I think, on some of this. What would be one final tool, tip, or strategy, or even something you'd love to tell your younger self or someone that's in the trenches at the moment about all your experiences and what we've talked about today? You're allowed to, even if you've got one or two, that's okay.
I would probably say that my absolute, if I could wipe away from my experience any of the guilt that I have experienced as a mum, I would. So I think anything that you can do to really kind of challenge yourself as a mom about that and start by, naming it and asking, where's this coming from? Is this serving me or my family, my children? For me, I certainly had, an aspect of guilt about being home at bedtime, but when I unpacked that, that was actually about I needed connection with my son.
Mm.
So then I kind of found other ways to be connected. So I was traveling, now it's a video call with him, or it's a video that, my husband will share at bedtime. So that was the connection. So yeah, mom guilt, we should just not do that anymore. Just over it.
Yeah, definitely. And also, where can people connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said, Pathmaker is the new business. So pathmaker.au, you can find out all of the work that we do as a strategic advisor. I do social enterprise. Yeah, love to be connected. So you can find me on LinkedIn or you can find our website.
Fantastic. Well, I have to say thank you so much, Laura, for being so vulnerable and also sharing your experiences and the journey that you have been on in returning to work and also motherhood. You've certainly been quite vulnerable and open and honest and quite raw as well. So thank you so much for that, because I know not everyone would necessarily do that, but I think also thank you so much because I think I'm sure to many other people listening, they'll be either able to identify that they've been through that journey, and I certainly can actually attest to that being on the opposite side here. But also then for people who are in the thick of it, I think you've given some really practical tools and tips and strategies to walk away with. So thank you so much for, creating this space and being so open and vulnerable. Thank you.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you.